Hey everybody, welcome to the show. Thanks for hanging out with us. So glad to be back, especially after our Easter break. Man, it's good to be with you. We missed you. So excited to be hanging out with you today, talking, as always, about some of these very real, very practical realities that exist within the life of everyday pastors, just like you. And I'm excited really to get into today's conversation because I think it's going to be part one, probably, of what is going to be several conversations as we start unpacking what are the various kind of habits that killed church growth. And habits are they're easy to form, they're very hard to break. Particularly in the life of ministry. I mean, we see this all the time, especially if you've kind of started into a church where you're replacing somebody or coming in off the heels of maybe a bad exit with somebody, previous to you. And you notice that, man, this church got a lot of habits, and some of these are really stifling and can lead to a lot of challenges to growth and momentum. And so we're going to get into that today. I think it's going to be a really helpful conversation, especially if you're in a spot where you're looking around your church and you're thinking, man, we've got some of these habits right here. So I'm looking forward to getting into that and seeing, man, just picking Greg's brain. I mean, this dude is, he's a wealth of knowledge and information, of entertainment. This guy. So check in with him first, man. See how he's doing over there. What's going on? Looks like you got a golf shirt on today. It's a beautiful Midwest day, man. What's going on?
It absolutely is. I mean, outside of the 6 inches of pollen dust that's on everything right now, it's a glorious day in the Midwest. Like I think high of 86 or something. So I really should be in shorts and flip flops, but my legs are so white. Everyone is appreciative that that they are not in shorts in this moment. But yeah, no, it's a gorgeous day here in the Midwest, and things are really good. It's been a few weeks since you and I have connected, and it's been a good couple of weeks. Really had a great Easter, and then we didn't get to talk about surviving the eclipse that was going to end the world.
Oh man,
but we both survived it.
Weird.
And it was super cool.
It was cool. It was neat.
But yeah, not nearly as kind of big,
dramatic.
I was hoping that people were right, that Jesus was going to return, like right in the middle of the eclipse.
That would have been awesome.
Would have been incredible.
Yeah. Yeah. That would have been an entrance worthy of our God. There's no question.
Hey, yeah, no, not any kind of question in there. But, we survived it.
Yeah.
And the craziness and the ridiculous traffic. So 10 minutes from my house was one of those totality
zones,
locations. Yeah. And so it was taking people 45 minutes or an hour to get those 10 minutes on the road. And I'm like, this is nuts.
Yeah.
All you folks going to see the eclipse, okay. I did appreciate though all of the memes that went around with that, especially the one that says, "Hey, while you're at it, don't look directly at the sun or at me."
Yes. Yeah,
I resonated with that one.
Yes.
And thought, yeah, don't look at me today.
Yeah, I loved all of the the end of the world kind of conspiracy stuff.
Yes.
And people were talking about, man, it's going to be the rapture on this date. And they were putting them on you printed out 8.5 by 11 sheets of paper and they were stapling them to telephone poles. And it's one of those things where I thought, man, if Jesus is coming back on this particular date, I don't think is that going to be his form of communication? Is, lost dog ads on telephone poles? I don't think so. I'm not a scholar, so I don't know. But I found that to be particularly of interest. I think it was kind of funny to me. But the eclipse was cool. It's always cool, man. I've got to see 2 of them now. I think that in recent memory, I remember one as a kid, maybe. But it was fun. It's a good time, and it's it's here, it's gone, and then now we're on to the next thing. So, it was a good time though, for sure. But man, it's good to see you, dude. Yeah, it's been a little bit. But I'm looking forward to jumping in here, man. Let's start our conversation and see kind of what you're thinking. So the premise of this is, we're talking about there are behaviors within the life cycle of a church. There are continual patterns that lead toward ultimately killing momentum and kind of killing church growth. And sometimes those can be very obvious. They can be very like, man, I can't, that church continues to do that. So, and we can look at that and go, well, no wonder they're struggling, right? But sometimes they're not so obvious, and that they just become more than sacred cows. They become kind of these cultural rhythms that cycle people in and out, and they just become this thing that stifles our ability to get beyond it. And so, man, the back door continues to remain wide open. The church can't ever get past a certain point. And so, these are just some of these kind of habits that we get stuck in. And sometimes they can be factors to identifying what kills our church growth. But more often than not, they're very much repeatable behaviors that we kind of pass on generation to generation. We see this, right? Like we know this exists within. And so I think some of these will be kind of self-explanatory, but I'd be curious to kind of pick your brain on it a little bit.
Okay.
But one of those, I think, habits that churches fall into, and it might be the biggest one that kind of drives all of it, is that churches don't have a strong sense of identity. And when there's not a sense of identity, when they don't have that real unique calling of where they stand in a community and what their purpose is and who they're trying to reach and what they're, what they're doing in order to accomplish, to live out that identity, it really becomes a habit that we repeat over and over and over again. And then now all of a sudden we're finding ourselves kind of killing growth because we're stuck in that place of a lack of identity. And so, I mean, I hate to necessarily make this comparison, but I think there's some truth in it. But it's like in the marketing space, right? Like the idea of branding and brand awareness. And I'm not suggesting that the church, you don't have to sell your church's identity to a community, but there is something to be said for brand awareness. You know what I mean? Like when a brand knows what it's there to do, it tends to be more successful in accomplishing its overall goals. So, I mean, how would you speak to a church lacking a strong sense of identity and how it relates to a habit that would ultimately kill a church's growth and momentum?
Yeah. So I think one of the big pieces of that puzzle is being sure that we make a distinction between identity and mission.
Okay.
Because I think sometimes we like to we're just to be making disciples. That's our identity. Well, okay, but that's really hard to quantify, and to be able to quickly articulate and assess. Are you doing that thing?
Sure.
That you are identifying as. And so, and I think unfortunately we often use mission and vision as identity.
Oh yeah, for sure. Yeah.
And so being able to say these things are mission and identity are very different. And so don't get lost in it or use them synonymously. And so ensuring that your identifier is clear, but that it isn't something that can be confused for mission or for your vision.
Okay. So then what in your mind, like how do you help someone identify if they're pursuing identity? Like how would you help coach a church or steer a church if they're saying, man, we're trying to pursue what our identity is in our community?
Okay. I think a great place to start is to find out what the people in your community think.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
Especially if you're new. If this is, you've just come into a new place, new place of ministry, and you're trying to figure out, how does the community see our church?
Yeah.
Go ask. They're probably going to be quick to tell you. And so go out, see what others in the community think about your church? Is the identity of your church that you all are, a church that serves your community?
Right.
Like, it doesn't matter what it is, but you guys are just all about serving the community, helping folks, providing, needs, those kind of things, meeting those needs of your community. Okay, press into that. That's an identifier. And so determining what your community already thinks about you, how they identify you, whether it's true or what you want it to be, is not necessarily the end there, but it is, how do they see us? And then let's assess that. Is that a true identity? And is it one that we're happy with?
Yeah, I mean,
or do we want to bring change to that identity?
Well, yeah, and I think being able to commit the time and the resources and putting together the effort to say, hey, we want to know what our community thinks. That is not going to be an easy undertaking.
No.
And yeah, but to your point, man, you might hear some stuff that you're like, oh gosh, man, like, do the people really think that? Or just, you may very well be think like, man, we feel like we show up in these very specific ways within our community, and really that's having no impact at all, because when people talk about us, they say that we're more like this, or so I think. And I think we have to remove some of the subjectivity to that, because it's easy from the inside to assume what you think the people on the outside think. So it does take a lot of work to try to figure that out. But I do believe that it is a worthwhile exercise. And there are resources that are out there that can help you do that. There are organizations that can help you do that. There are ways to do that. But I think also in this conversation, the space around, a lack of strong identity. I think this habit, man, and it's like, man, how is that really a habit? Well, it's a habit because churches often, like you said, they get stuck on saying, well, our mission, vision, and our values, that's our identity. And so those are the things that we're going to hone and keep working, assuming that, like, you have a church that's hungry for those things and hungry for more clarity around those things. But I think also within the space of identity, every church in your community is there now, assuming that, and when I say church, we're talking about a Bible-based, gospel-centered church. Those churches that are in your community are there for a reason. And so your church exists within its community for a reason. And I think discovering what makes your church unique is really important. Your unique calling to a community and your unique placement in the community is paramount to your identity. And so really it comes down to discovering what is that kingdom concept that we've been called into. And so, man, what are the pain points in your community that your church is uniquely positioned to help solve, to speak into, to relieve, to bring hope in? What are those unique skills and gifts and identifiers, like you said? What are those that exist within your church that you can bring to the forefront? And oftentimes churches don't look at their placement in a community through that lens, but rather they just say, man, well, we're here, we've been here for X amount of time, and maybe we go so far to a kind of like, well, these are the type of people that we reach. And again, that's fine. That's all. Those are all good identifiers. But overall, your church's identity is directly, in my opinion, linked to its unique existence in a community, and its unique ability to show up. And so I think that's an important part of that conversation as well. And until churches really spend the time, putting the work into identifying what that unique calling is, we find ourselves in a habitual pattern of no identity.
Yeah. Well, and I think the other thing that comes with it is that sometimes when the church doesn't know what its identity is, it will automatically take on the identity of the pastor.
Oh, big time. Big time.
And that's great till that pastor leaves.
Yep.
And so I think that's the other piece of this that we have to consider is, okay, how much of this, especially from the seat of the pastors, to say, Okay, how much of this is our identity as pastors, and how much of this is the church's identity? And do those two things connect?
Yeah. Yeah, and they do connect. And I mean, in a large part, man, like one of the things pastors are paid to do is help shape the identity of a church.
Sure.
You know, I mean, if you're going to have a platform and you're going to have a voice and you're going to have a big part in steering direction, that's a big part of what we're kind of paid to do in those roles. And so, you know, contributing to the overall conversation, that's why it's so critical we get it right, because you don't want your church to be personality driven.
Mm-hmm.
You want it to be identity driven. And that identity is informed and it's shaped by the gospel, of course. It's informed and shaped by our mission, vision, and values. But at the end of the day, it is in large part uniquely formed by your church's particular position in its community and who it's there to reach. And I think that's a really, really important conversation, I think, for leaders to be having, because, man, you want to know what's killing your church growth is because your church didn't know who it is,
right?
Who it's supposed to be.
So let me spin this back to you just a little bit and ask the second question that I think goes with it. So, how much do you think this either lack of identity or the lack of clarity in identity is directly related to our culture's overwhelming move toward emotion and feelings?
Oh, yeah. I mean, I think there's a huge part of that, because I think that it is easy to play to the lowest common denominator, and the lowest common denominator is appealing to emotion. And I think on some level there may be even like a decision to not go a certain direction for fear of placating emotion and emotional responses. And so I think what we have to do is we have to rise above some of those emotional tendencies and recognize that individuality, it exists within the body of Christ, but only in a way that it brings a collective group of people together to sit in a unique position to do the work that Christ has called that body to do. So that there is some of this individuality, but it's not seen through the individual lens of one particular person and one particular person's emotional take on stuff or response to stuff. But I think there's in large part this idea that, man, in church, we want to reach as many people as we can. And so, even if God has uniquely positioned us to be a neighborhood church, we've abandoned that to be a regional church. So we're going to cast as big of a net as we can, and we're going to appeal to emotion as a means to grab as many folks as we can. Or God's calling us to be a regional church, but man, we're so stuck in being this neighborhood, or whatever it is. Like there's so many of these factors that go into it, even to some degree driven by our own emotion, that keeps us from having clear identity. There are churches that are never going to reach their full kingdom potential because of feelings. Mm-hmm. And I mean, I remember serving at a church, man, where I've heard people say, like, man, I hope this church never gets big. I hope this church never gets over a certain number of people, because I don't want to feel like I don't know people, or I don't want to feel like people don't know me. And I thought, how sad is that? How sad is it you're going to deny someone else's opportunity to have access to the community that you have because you're afraid of losing your unfettered access to it? Feelings are a dangerous game within the overall identity of a church. And that's why it has to come down to, I think, that unique calling.
And even at a personal level, they're incredibly dangerous.
Yeah. Oh gosh. Yeah.
Or at least can be, because if I begin to put too much weight in how I feel about something versus, okay, what does the Bible say? Mm-hmm. What does God say about us? What does God say about the church? And are those the things that we're buying and believing, or are we buying and believing our own emotional response to something else?
Yeah.
And so yeah, I think we have to be careful that yes, we're cognizant of emotion and how it does play into every aspect of our lives, but not allowing for our emotions to be our identifier.
Yes.
Or our identity, whether it's personal or corporate as the body.
Yes. Yeah, I don't disagree at all, man. I think that's an important warning in this process of determining identity. And I think to that point brings me to the kind of the next habit that man, this habit tends to kill church growth. And again, it's coming back to some of this more like objective information, but it's also this idea of not tracking the data. And I know that, man, this can be such a like a hot button issue within churches because it's like, oh, you only care about the numbers, the ABCs, the attendance, the buildings, and the cash. And it's like, no, man, like your church tells, like your church's activity tells a story. It creates data. Data tells the story. And it's up to you to determine what data you want to track and you want to collect. But here's the deal. You can't evaluate what you don't measure. So you have to identify as a church what our metrics are and what, what those measures are and how we evaluate our overall growth, how we evaluate our overall health and our overall quote unquote success in light of those measures, in light of those metrics, so like for you guys, what do you track? Like what do you keep tabs on as a church?
So several things that we try to keep out in the forefront is we want to know how many of our people are serving somewhere. We want to know of our, kind of weekly attendance, who's in some kind of small group, whether that's one of our life groups or a Bible study group. But we want to know that. We want to know, how are we doing giving wise? Because that's a big deal. But then we also want to know, like we do what we call next steps. And some of our next steps that we're tracking is, did you make a personal invitation to church?
Oh, that's good.
Did you have a gospel conversation this week? And we fleshed out for our people, what's a gospel conversation? Well, it can be anything that points someone to Jesus. So it might be, hey, I was at church this week, and here's what the pastor preached on, or I was reading in my Bible, or like it doesn't just have to be telling somebody how they can know Jesus,
right?
But simply something that points toward the gospel and toward Jesus, and setting up a stage for that to happen. We want to know, did you serve? How are you praying? Have you prayed for our ministry partners this week, or what other things, are going on? Because we want to have an idea of where are our people. Now, are there probably other metrics and other things that people want to know and that we might at some point want to track? Sure. But those are some ones that kind of give us a good handle at our place on how we're doing, how engaged our people are. Are we, headed toward our goals for the year? And so those have been some helpful ones for us in kind of figuring out what our scorecard is going to be.
Yeah, and I like that your scorecard doesn't begin and it doesn't end with, nickels and noses, and I think that's really healthy, man. I think the metrics that you guys are leaning into are healthy metrics, because those are the things that you can stand on stage and say, we want as many people as we can to be involved in serving. That's a great metric. That's huge. Who doesn't want to see somebody win by getting involved in serving? We want to see as many people as we can involved in some sort of small group, whether it's a life group or a Bible study. We want to see people taking next steps, and we want to hear those stories. We want to hear the stories of the gospel conversations that you're having, right? Like, these are the things that are so important for a church to press into and identify and have a habit of tracking the right things that make sense for their overall unique positioning, and that fit within their strategy. And so the things that you count are the things that you can evaluate. And as you evaluate, you can begin to tell the stories of success, therefore reshaping the overall culture of your church, from the stage, from online, from within all of your classes, from how your leaders are trained, and helping people understand that, man, oh man, these are the things that matter to us. And we want to make sure that we're counting these. And so by telling people the things that we're counting, especially when they're really healthy, we're teaching them that these things matter in the kingdom. They matter to Jesus, right? And they should be counting those things as well. And so that then helps people understand what like spiritual formation and spiritual growth looks like. Like, man, I've been working with this person that I've been trying to get them to come to our small group. And I just know that, man, if I can get them there, that'll be a huge win. Yeah. When that happens, please let us know, because we want to celebrate that with you. Mm-hmm. You know, like, oh man, like that helps someone know how to win. Otherwise it just becomes very subjective.
Yeah. Well, and here's the other thing, like, and I got caught in this trap for a long time. Like, I knew that the scorecard for most churches was broken.
Yeah.
Like what they were tracking and what they were looking into, and what, conferences of churches or denominations were looking at. Like, I knew that scorecard was broken, but I fell into the trap of, well, I know it's broken, but I don't have a better one, so I'm just not going to do anything.
Oh, that's, yeah. Mm-hmm.
Instead of saying, okay, but let's find a scorecard that works for us. So no, like, your scorecard's going to be different than our scorecard, and that's okay. Because the things that you're working on are going to be different than the things that we're working on. And our scorecard may shift in 2 years when we put a different emphasis on something else that we're saying, hey, this is so important to us that we're going to start tracking it, and we want to hear about it so that we can celebrate it and keep teaching that behavior to our people. Yep. So something might drop off the scorecard for a while, or we may just add something else to the scorecard. But don't not have a scorecard just because you think all the ones that you've seen are broken. Okay, maybe they are. Create your own scorecard and assess what's important for you all, and then begin to track that thing. Because what you track, you can celebrate.
Yeah,
what you celebrate will become part of the culture of your church.
You're not kidding, man. I think also even just the language of scorecard, like there's probably somebody listening right now and they're like, oh my gosh, a church with a scorecard? Like, what are we talking about? And it's like, well, yeah. I mean, you put whatever language that you want around it. I like that language because I think it's great. I think you want people to know how to win. And I think in life, it's just really hard sometimes to know, particularly in this space of spiritual growth and spiritual formation. Like, we don't always know, like, what does that mean to win? Like, I went to a Bible study this year. I'm reading my Bible a bit more. Like, and it's not like your actions become this thing that you're trying to quantify against God's grace and his goodness in your life, but rather as, Lord, I want to know that like our church is pursuing you obediently. And I want you to help us, Lord, shape the things that we need to be paying attention to and tracking, so we know that we're heading in that right direction, not just collectively as a body, but individually, how we're helping people do that as well. And so when they look back over the year and they say, well, 2 years ago, I didn't read my Bible hardly at all. And I didn't do any studies. Well, this year, I did one 90-day plan. And I went to a couple of classes. That's awesome. Let's celebrate that. That's a scorecard, right? So I think those are just like really, really helpful tips in this overall conversation that we need to be having in our churches. And again, I don't want us to try to hit every one of these habits in one conversation, because, man, there's so many of them that I think are critical for us to identify and address. But in this particular episode today, I wanted us to just kind of hit on a couple of these that if we did nothing else in our churches but went back to our leadership teams and said, hey, I want us to start talking about identity, and I want us to start talking about our metrics. Those two conversations right there could keep you busy the rest of the year.
Yep.
Right? I mean, it easily the rest of the year in understanding what your unique positioning is in your community. What is your kingdom concept? And what are those things that we're evaluating and tracking? And do we have clarity on our numbers, on our metrics, or are we just focusing on the low hanging fruit that don't really tell you anything? I tell people all the time, it's not difficult anymore to draw a crowd, right? Like, we can draw a crowd. Look, car accidents draw a crowd. That doesn't mean that's something that we want to be like applauding. So these are just two huge habits that kill church growth when we get them wrong. Mm-hmm. And so this is kind of our focus for today's episode, and we're going to be coming back to this conversation over the next couple of months. Is we're going to kind of here and there come back and talk about more of these habits, because I think it's really important to put together an overall collection so that we can continue to help you guys as you're having these conversations with your leadership team. Begin to think about these things that really kind of stand out and matter. But man, Greg, truly appreciate your insight on that, dude. That was super helpful today, and I love that. As always, man, we're so thankful that you guys are a part of this show, that you're a part of this community, and really, when it comes down to tracking the right things and having the right metrics, and Simplified Church can help you with that. One of the things that we love to do is partner with churches in the area of accounting and bookkeeping, and helping you work through your budget to make sure that you are funding ministries appropriately and helpfully, so that you guys can do the things that you're called to do, that you're uniquely called to do. So we'd love to partner with you in that. So if you're not a part of the Simplify family in that way, schedule a demo call. We'd love to get on there with you and answer any questions that you might have, and help show you what we can do to help partner with your church in these areas. Lots of cool things coming down the pipe as well with Simplify. So make sure you subscribe so you can stay up to date with our email newsletter. You can always learn more about our podcast on the website as well, simplifychurch.com. You can find us on Apple Podcasts and Spotify. So thanks for hanging out with us, gang. We so appreciate this community that we have, and hope you have a great week. We'll talk to you soon.